and then we're
If
ready.
I move on to your first slide.
Fantastic. Right, that's brilliant. Okay, so we'll get started then. So good morning, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. It's jointly delivered by NQICAM and Sam Riley, obviously from NHS England and Improvement. So my name's Vicky Patel, and I'm the chair of the National Quality Improvement, including Clinical Audit Network, and Deputy Clinical Effectiveness Manager at Sheffield Teaching Hospitals. So we're really excited to get started. We had over 300 registered for today's webinar, and we've got high numbers still joining as we speak. So we appreciate that not everyone has been able to join us this morning, given the current pressures on the front line, but we will be recording, as Sam's already stated and started, and we'll make this available following today's event. So, as we have got so many of us together, and I know Sarah's already mentioned it, we'll ask you to use the chat function to introduce yourself, ask any questions, post any comments and feedback, and we'll have the opportunity for questions partway through. So today's agenda will start with an introduction to set the scene, then we'll follow on with SPC refresh for you all, and then we'll move into the opportunity for you to ask any questions at that point. So we're going to look at what does this mean for clinical audit, and then we're going to share some tools so we can best use SPCs to really get the most out of driving those improvements as a result of clinical audit. We've then got a Mentimeter, where we'd like you all again to interact with us, and then we'll move to close the webinar with next steps at around 11:30. So next slide, please, Sam. So this is the opportunity. I've introduced myself, so I'm just going to ask Sam and Sarah to introduce themselves. Sam, do you want to go first?
Hi everybody, so I'm Sam. Turn my camera off, sorry, it wasn't working otherwise. So I head up the Making Data Count team. I'm not an analyst or a stats person, I'm an improvement person. Some of you might know me as Plot the Dots Lady. Don't know what I feel about that, but anyway. Sarah.
I think you definitely are Plot the Dots Lady, but you do have other important roles as well. Thank you. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah Chesel, General Secretary for NQICAN, working closely with Vicky and our regional network chairs. I'm also Head of Innovation in University Hospitals Dorset, and you can see the other titles there. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. So fantastic. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes for anyone who isn't already part of their regional network and therefore part of NQICAN. I just want to share with you how you could get involved, and for all those already involved, a recap on who we are and why we're here. So the NQICAN, the National Quality Improvement in Clinical Audit Network, it's a professional network of colleagues. We undertake clinical audit and other improvement work across England. Founded in 2000 under the name of NAG, some of you may have remembered that name, the National Audit Governance Group. 2008 we became NQICAN. Further tweaked the name in 2018 to include in clinical audit, to really promote the fact that clinical audit is a QI tool. So NQICAN meet on a quarterly basis. We consist of regional network chairs, officers, non-officers, co-opted members, with the aim of representing all types of health and social care organisations, and we provide a voice on behalf of teams and patients in improving patient care. So we've got 12 regional networks covering over 500 organisations that provide care to patients. If you're not yet a member of your regional network, have a look on the NQICAN website, find out who your chair and contact is for getting involved. Alternatively, you can contact either Sarah or I, or Becca, who's our communications officer, via the nqi.can1@nhs.net email address. And if you are already a member, and you perhaps know of a health and social care organisation that isn't a member, why not get them invited to join? We've also got a networking and sharing forum. Regional networks have got a space for sharing agendas, minutes and news. You can post threads for sharing, asking questions, and you might also feel that you can respond to questions and share your knowledge and expertise more widely. If you're already a member of the forum and you know of others who aren't, just give them a gentle nudge, raise awareness to the forum and encourage them to join. We send out regular newsletters with links to the latest and most popular threads, and we also aim to put information at the click of a finger for you to make it easy. The forum's only going to grow and get better still if we've got more members, so we want as many people as possible to be part of this quality improvement community. Now, we've got a common purpose, and today's session is in full support of helping us to deliver on that. And that's about us supporting our members to deliver high quality projects that are helping us to improve patient care as part of our local programmes. And we're going to touch on some high quality projects later on in today's webinar. So behind the common purpose, we've got a forward plan that consists of about 40 different initiatives, and this is to help our teams to drive improvement at a local level with the aim of improving patient care. And today's webinar really supports our forward plan in terms of us hosting national events, virtual training for clinical audit, and it's about us sharing, learning and promoting clinical audit as a QI tool. So today's about reflecting and questioning. Are we using clinical audit to its full potential in order to maximise the improvements that we can actually make to patient care? So next slide, please, Sam. Okay, so clinical audit for assurance or for improvement or for both. So just very briefly then, we all know that we've got clinical audit programs in place. We have to provide assurance to our commissioners, our regulators, to our board. And this is both reporting on a programme level and project level as well. But the driver of these projects should be quality improvement. And any reporting at any point in time provides that assurance that we're monitoring and we can evidence improvements that we're making. So participation in our clinical audit should be focused on improvement right from the outset. And our traditional clinical audit methodology, capturing snapshots in time, doesn't always support a robust model for improvement. And we're seeing more national audits move to continuous data collection and presentation over time. And we've now got to start thinking about applying this to our local programmes and projects. So we want you to hold that thought. We're pretty much going to challenge you to today. Even if you think that clinical audit in your own organisation, you happen to do pretty well. What can you take away from today? How can you start to think differently? Can you critique your clinical audit processes and systems? Identify how you could make changes to further strengthen and maximise those outputs. And we'll have a look a little bit later on in the Mentimeter at that. So I'm going to hand over to Sam now, who's going to walk us through a refresh of the SPCs. Next slide, please, Sam.
Thanks, Vicky. Great introduction. So you've got a bit of me now to either provide a refresh on making data counts or to provide you with an introduction. I reckon some of you might know some of this already, but some of you might be new to it. So please forgive me if I'm going to tell you some things that you know already. So what I want to start with is I want to show you some different visualizations of data and information. And I'd like you to type in the chat box what you think about them. So here's your first one. So if anybody feels brave enough to express a view on this visualization of information, then get your typing fingers ready. And this is the point at which I test whether audit people are like the other audiences that I speak to a lot. Oh, and I can see just from these few comments at the start, I think that you're a normal audience. We've got somebody very polite there that says it lacks clarity. That's very polite. I think some of the rest of you are suggesting it might be a bit headachy, a bit too busy. This is a crazy one to start with, but it is real. Somebody produced this when I worked in West London many years ago. So I'm hoping you don't produce graphs that look like this. I think the best use that we can put this to, well, is either hang it on the wall or maybe we could knit a scarf pattern. But I think the best thing we've seen this graph put to is this. So when we were allowed to travel and actually meet people like you actually created some nice origami for that visual. So that's lovely, isn't it? But it's not a useful piece of analysis. Okay, so how about this one? Now I work a lot with teams in organisations to help them think about how they could monitor their performance better. So here we've got a visualisation that looks at how an organisation is doing against referral to treatment performance. Now you can see at the top here, there's a target of 92%. So does anybody like this visual? Is this useful to us? Do you see things that look like this maybe? Again, I wonder if any of you create things that look like this. So it looks familiar. I can see Paul has said. It is a bit of a sea of red. Is it easy to see what's going on in this visual? Have a think about it. Is this an easy way for us to understand our data? I don't think it is particularly. Do you notice that arrow at the end of the table here? We've got a trend arrow here. That reminds me of Bruce Forsyth. Do you remember the game, playing your cards right, Bruce Forsyth? The game was the card's going to be higher or lower or the same. If we've got two numbers, the second number is going to be higher or lower or the same. So is this helpful, telling us the number went up? I don't think it is, but we're going to come back to this one a little bit later. By the way, if you're colourblind, you're not going to be able to see red and green because colourblind people can't see those colours. So that's a good reason to not use them. Okay, so let's move into a little world of fiction, and let's imagine that we are all members sitting on a board of a trust, and we've received our board papers, and the board papers this month are 280 pages long. And this particular page is all green for those of you that might be colourblind, and these are nationally set targets. So I've got quite a busy life. I'm going to be a naughty board member. I'm going to flick over this page because I haven't got time to read every single page in the report. So is anybody else flicking over the page with me? I won't tell anybody if you are going to flick over the page. Obviously, I've revealed that I'm going to be a naughty board member, but everything's fine here. So is anybody else keen to get onto the other 279 pages? Okay, Nikki thinks it's fine. Marina thinks it's fine. I can see some thumbs up. I'm sure that some of you are very studious and you're going to look at every single page. But yeah, most of you are saying it looks absolutely fine. So we'll move on then. Okay, so now we've moved into our board meeting, and I'm the chair of this particular board meeting today. And I've done a bad job of chairing, and we've only got 5 minutes left in the meeting. So we can only talk about one of these 4 graphs. So when I know which one I want to talk about, I'm interested to know which one you want to talk about. We can only talk about one. So do you want to type in the chat box which one you would like to have a conversation about? And we'll see if we can build a little consensus. I think already that most people, actually virtually everybody, is saying, not everybody, but most people are saying that they want to look at the 6-week indicator, the IAPS treatment 6-week indicator. That's handy because that's the one that I want to have a conversation about. So it looks like something's happening there. Now, some of you might be aware that these are statistical process control charts, or SPC for short. I don't know if any of you clocked that actually that page that was all green when we thought everything was fine and we were going to flick over the page is actually the same data as we've used to populate these 4 graphs. Now we've got some more time series in here, we've got more data, but it is the same data. So we've moved from a position of thinking that everything's okay to wanting to talk about at least one of these indicators here. So did that green provide us with proper assurance? Well, clearly it didn't. So what have we got going on here? Well, on this graph, you can see that we've got blue dots to start with, and then we've got orange dots. Now, where we can see the orange dots here, what the graph is telling us is that something has happened with our data that is unlikely to have occurred randomly. That's called special cause variation for an SPC chart. So we've got special cause variation telling us that something has changed. It's changed for the worst here. Why have they been green? Well, they haven't yet missed the target. They've just about achieved it that 1 month. We can be pretty sure if they don't change anything, if they don't intervene and do something different, very soon this indicator is going to go red. Then there's going to be a big panic. So I don't know if any of you have experienced that in your organisations. So we've got this thing called variation. We've got variation in all of our lives. And we need to understand that there are different types of variation. It's really important that we can distinguish between the 2 types of variation. So we've got this thing that's normal variation. So if we think about travelling to work every day, apart from me at the moment, because I'm sleeping and working in the same room, actually, having COVID, But on a normal basis, if we travel to work every day, we wouldn't arrive at exactly the same time. We'd have natural variation. So we'd be arriving at a slightly different time each day. That's called common cause variation in the world of SPC. But then we've got unusual variation as well. So here we've got an example where we've got a tube station closed in London. If I was needing to travel through this tube station, then it's going to take me a lot longer. That's called special cause variation in my world. So special cause variation is that unusual variation that we're not going to see all the time. Now for special cause variation, if we see it, like we just saw it in that graph, we do need to investigate the cause. But we've got two types of special cause variation. If we think about driving to work, let's imagine that there was a car crash. That's going to mean that we're going to spend a lot longer travelling to work that day. But that's hopefully a one-off event because we don't have a car crash every day when we go to work. But imagine the situation where a road layout has changed. Well, that's going to affect our journey every day. So that is a different type of special cause variation. That special cause variation is going to be with us probably, well, for a very long time, if not forever, unless that road setting is changed back again. So we've got two types of special cause variation. We've got that one-off variation, and then we've got sustained change. In both situations, if this happens, we need to go and understand what's happening. Now, some of you might have come across the word spuddling. This might be a new word for some of you. You might never forget this word. So spuddling is a word from hundreds of years ago, and it comes from the West Country. What's the definition? To make a lot of fuss about trivial things as if they were important. Now, sometimes what we find is that people in the NHS overreact to that natural variation that we see. And if we overreact to natural variation, what we're doing is we're spuddling. We're overreacting to something that is just changing naturally. We don't want to be spuddling because it's going to waste a lot of time, a lot of resource and a lot of energy. So we really don't want to be spuddling with our data. We also don't want to be tampering with our data. Now, if we overreact to that natural variation and we change something in our processes or in our systems, we tamper with the system. That nearly always makes variation wider. We've got more variation if we tend to tamper. And you probably know the thing that we want to do is to be reducing that natural variation, because that can be really impactful in a good way on our processes and for our patients. So thanks to Kent Community Trust, when I was allowed to travel, I had one of these fabulous artists, and I think they got the real essence of what spuddling is about. So we don't want the big fuss and drama and the panic of spuddling, because that is not a good thing. We haven't got time to spuddle with our data. Now, people have liked the word spuddling. I can see a few smiles on the screen, so I think some of you like the word spuddling as well. So here we've got Alistair. He's an anaesthetist, and he's happy because he got the first set of spuddling cards. So if he's in a meeting and he thinks somebody might be spuddling with their data, he's going to hold up the yellow card. Doesn't say you are spuddling, by the way, does it? It asks the question, are you spuddling? And then if they do it again, he's going to hold up the red card, probably more forcefully. So if you attend one of our slightly longer training sessions, because I've only got half an hour with you today to talk about SPC, then we'll have a little form that you can fill in and you can get your very own spuddling card. So there's an incentive to attend a future training session. Oh, Carl's got spuddling cards already, obviously. Carl's got lots of spuddling cards, so is Vicky. Look, she's holding them up. So it might sound like a silly thing, but it's really driving a behaviour change because people are understanding that actually we don't want to be overreacting to data when there's nothing really changing. So why have I been focusing for the last few years on teaching people about SPC? And I should say that we've now trained over 10,000 people via Teams meetings like this. So over the past year or so, we've trained over 10,000 people. So welcome to the gang, guys. So why are we focusing on SPC? Is it a new thing? Well, it's not a new thing. It's been around for about 100 years. It started in the manufacturing industry, but it's highly applicable to healthcare. So there are hundreds of papers talking about the impacts of using SPC in healthcare. There is a really strong evidence base that says that we make better decisions if we use SPC. So that's why we have focused particularly on SPC. So we've been doing a lot of work over the past 3 years or so, working with boards. We've now worked with about 150 boards across the country. Most of them are trust boards. Many of you will be working for organisations where we've worked with your boards. And this is a paper that I had published last year, and it talks about the impacts of running those making data count sessions with boards. So we can put the link into the chat box a little bit later. You'll get these slides at the end as well. So you might want to have a little read about the impacts of changing how boards look at data. So that's how boards look at data, but we want you, as you go through this session, to think about how what I'm talking about could impact in your world, in the world of clinical audit. The CQC are also big fans of SPC. They published this a number of years ago. So they are expecting boards to be looking at SPC. They don't want people to be looking at VAG-rated charts, pie charts, or other horrible charts. I've got a couple of horrible charts for you coming up a little bit later. So that's important, isn't it, that the CQC are wanting people to be using SPC, and they are seeing making data count as a best practice approach. So let's just refresh on the anatomy of a chart. So the charts are simple, they're nothing to be scared of. So we've basically got time series data, and on an SPC chart, we have got these 3 lines. We've got the average in the middle, and then we've got these additional lines that are either called process limits or control limits. They are interchangeable terms. Now they're set on a particular calculation that we don't really need to worry about today. If you're interested, it's called 3 sigma. All of our tools, by the way, we've got lots of tools that you can use. They do this calculation for you automatically. So the important thing that you need to remember about the process limits is that around 99% of the data points are going to fall between those process limits, and that's important to remember and understand. Now you do need a minimum number of points to create a chart, an SPC chart. You really ideally need around 15 data points. If you've got slightly less data, you probably get away with creating an SPC chart, but we can't really do it with 5 or 6 data points. So that might be a challenge in your world. Now, Vicky might come back to that a little bit later. So one of the things that we've learned that's really important about maximising our SPC charts is that we use a colour convention to identify what's happening in the data. So we saw this at the start, didn't we, when I showed you that graph about eye after treatment 6 weeks. So we've adopted a colour convention that is, if you see orange dots, it's a concerning pattern in the data. If you see blue dots, it's improvement in the data. If you're colourblind, by the way, you can see those colours. If you're seeing grey dots, it's just showing you that expected variation, that natural variation. Now, we know that sometimes you've got lots of measures that you need to be looking at, so you might not want to have 30 or 40 charts because that can take up a lot of space. So we've come up with the idea of using these icons, summary icons that summarise the important messages in the data. It's the variation icon here, and these are automatically produced for you again. So if we're seeing an orange icon, it means the variation is getting worse. If we're seeing a blue icon, it's getting better. And if we're seeing a grey icon, it's just that expected variation that we've seen. And then if we've got a target, or maybe you've got a clinical threshold, or you've got a standard, if we're seeing a blue P, it means that we're going to always achieve the target. And orange F, we're always going to fail the target. And a grey question mark, we're going to sometimes achieve the target and sometimes not achieve the target. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about that in a little moment. We also, by the way, do need words that are reflective of what's going on in the data. And of course, we'd ideally also want to know what we're doing if we need some improvement in our data. So we've looked at those colours, we've looked at the orange and the blue. Those orange and blue colours are going to be triggered if one of these rules is triggered. So for SPC, we've got 4 rules that apply to the data. And if one of these rules is triggered, it doesn't matter which rule is triggered, it's telling us there's an unusual pattern in the data. So the term for this is special cause variation. So I'm not going to run through each of the rules. You just need to remember those colours. So if you're seeing a graph with orange dots, it's concerning. If you're seeing blue dots, it means that's improvement that, of course, we could learn from. So if we've got special cause variation, if we don't know what's caused it, we do need to go and find out because something has happened. But let's think about this situation. So here we've got a target that we need to achieve. We need to achieve 40 or greater, and we've only got those grey dots. So we've only got the grey dots of common cause variation. That's the term for that expected or natural variation. So does anybody want to be brave and type in the chat box the answer to my question? So my question is, what's the likelihood of achieving this particular target? We need to achieve 40 or greater. So what do we know about looking at this graph and the likelihood of achieving the target? Remember, I showed you the anatomy of a chart. So Natalie's quick in there with a perfect answer. So yes, so it's not a great position here, is it? So it's almost impossible for us to be achieving this target because the data is going to fall between those grey dotted lines, as we can see in this graph. So what would we need to do here if we want to achieve the target? Well, we need to go away and do some system redesign. How about this situation? We have got the flip side here. So we've got a target that needs to be achieved of 10 or greater. So I reckon you know the answer to this one, because of course we're going to consistently achieve the target here. Is there anything that you might think about doing if you had an SPC chart that looked like this? So if you were in a team meeting or in a clinical audit meeting and you had a graph like this, what might you talk about doing? Okay, so Denise wins the prize for the first answer here. Yes, I'd want to have a conversation about raising the targets. So that would be a good conversation to have. We also might want to have a think about, do we want to direct some resource from this area that's doing really well to an area that isn't doing so well? So that's one of the things that sometimes board members would suggest to us. And yes, of course, we could look at what's working well and we could look and see if we could replicate this to another area. So that's a capable system. And here's the last one that I'm going to ask you about. So this one confuses people sometimes, but you do know the answer if you think about it. So here we've got the target line. It's very close to the mean. So it's right in the middle, isn't it, of the chart. So what's the likelihood of achieving this particular target? You do know the answer if you think about it. So let's see who's brave for this one. Board members get confused by this, by the way. But I have some very good answers here. So yes, this, if you put this is a kind of 50-50 chance, it's going to hit and miss, absolutely. You might have seen me present before, but you've remembered very well, because of course the data is going to fall between those grey dotted lines, those process limits. If this is in a RAG report, by the way, it's going to look something like green, red, green, red, red, etc. That's when we might spuddle. But actually, sometimes we're going to achieve the target and sometimes we're not going to achieve the target. So for me, I want to look at when we achieve the target, are there situations that we could learn from and roll out? That might not be the position, it might be the position. I reckon we probably will need to do some redesign work if we want to be consistently achieving the target. The process limits are set automatically, so we can't change the process limits unless we change the data that's within it. So SPC can be used both from an improvement side and also from an assurance side. So in that example that we've just seen, I think we would need to use something like the model for improvement if we wanted to move to a position where we were consistently achieving the target. I'm sure you're familiar with the model for improvement, or I believe you have something similar in the clinical audit world. I'm not in the clinical audit world, but the model for improvement, we're going to think about what we're trying to accomplish, how are we going to know whether a change is going to be an improvement, and then we're going to move into thinking about what we're going to measure, and we're going to run through cycles of plan, do, study and act cycles. And for that, it's really important that we have good data to enable us to understand whether what we're doing is resulting in improvement. So here's a beautiful chart. I'll come back to this one a little bit later, but here we can see an SPC chart where this organisation has made some interventions, and you can see that actually that's had a big impact on the data. But we can also use SPC, and I do feel I always need to stress this with audiences, whatever the audience. We do have lots of targets in the NHS. We can also use SPC to really understand whether we are improving things. So here we've got a situation where we wouldn't want to be using a RAG rated chart, we'd want to be using an SPC chart. So we can use SPC for both of these things. So we looked at this example right at the start. So RTT performance, I think some of you at the time thought it wasn't too bad. So let's have a look at a couple of specialties here. So we've got general surgery, it's all red with a downward arrow. We probably get the feeling it's bad performance and it's getting worse. Let's have a look at my SPC chart. So this is what it looks like. So here we've got those lovely blue dots of improvement showing us that actually we should be saying well done to general surgery. They're not achieving the target yet, but they've done incredible work, and we shouldn't be nagging them, because actually if they keep going with this, hopefully they're going to achieve the target really soon. Let's look at rheumatology. It looks the same as the previous example. What's the SPC chart going to look like? Well, it looks totally different. So here we've got the orange dots of concern. So it's really easy to misinterpret what's going on, isn't it, in those RAG rated charts. So please, if you see any RAG rated charts, please send them back. Please send them on our training sessions. But let's think about some clinical audit data. So I found this online. Didn't look quite like this. Jen has recreated it. So this is percentage compliance. I don't know what the compliance was for, but I did see this comment. Our project was an amazing success. So was it an amazing success? What do we think? Does this prove success? Well, for me, 4 data points isn't going to convince me that this is successful. What would I want to do? Well, I'd want a longer time series. Now, does this show us success? Well, you now know that we've got grey dots going on here. So we've just got that expected level of variation here. So is this successful? Let's imagine that those 4 dots that we saw on the previous graph, let's imagine it was these 4 dots. So is that showing success? So it's not, because we've got just that expected level of variation. So important that we have more data. Here's an example that I found via a quick Google. We call these spaghetti charts. I hope that you don't create spaghetti charts. Please don't tell me if you create spaghetti charts. Now, I do like spaghetti, but I only like it for dinner. So spaghetti is good for dinner. This tends to be the reaction that I have, or Jen has, my colleague, or Karen. That's the reaction you're going to get if you provide us with a spaghetti chart. It's really difficult to identify what's going on in a spaghetti chart. What could we do instead? Well, we could plot the dots as SPC charts. So here we've plotted the 5 lines. We've got some more data going on here, but it's easy to see now, isn't it, that we've got improvement in the data. So happy smiley face coming along. Remember, we don't need all of those charts. We could just use those icons. So here we can see 5 blue icons showing that we have got beautiful improvement in our data. So that's a happy position, a thumbs up. How about this situation? So this is another Google find for me. This is looking at falls per 1,000 bed days, and I'm pretty sure this was from a quality account. So does this show success? You can see that the chart is annotated with a range of different things that were done. Does this demonstrate success? Well, nothing's improved, has it? In fact, those process limits have got slightly wider, showing that the variation has improved, has increased somewhat. So we haven't got improvement going on here. So whatever this organisation tried to do, it hasn't resulted in improvement. So that one makes me sad, because I'm not sure if they really understood that, because it was in a quality account. Of course, they might have said that they were learning from this experience. That would be a good thing, but this doesn't demonstrate success. How about this example? This is the percentage mortality, emergency admissions to suspicion of sepsis. There we've got lots and lots and lots of blue dots. We should do something called recalculate our process limits here. We haven't got time to talk about that today. You need to join another training session if you want to know what's going on. But you can see that actually there's significant improvement in the data that should be celebrated. We could have a party. We wouldn't have cheese and wine at the party, and it wouldn't be in COVID restriction time, obviously, but we should be celebrating this improvement. So that's a good situation. Here we've got an organisation. They use this data to show the CQC that they had improved their performance for their safeguarding training. So this is good, isn't it? Because we've got blue dots. Now, one of those areas is not achieving the target yet, but we've got the blue dots of improvement. So that again is to be celebrated with no cheese and wine, obviously. And here we've got indicators related to a variety of indicators in A&E departments. This is looking at 2 hospital sites. The graphs are small, but again, we can understand the graphs because we know what the blue dots mean. So we're going to have a big celebration here. We've got loads of blue dots for improvement, so that is wonderful. Happy smiley face. So we really want to be evidencing our improvement efforts with data. And here's a nice paper that's been published by our friend Alistair, who we met at the start with his spuddling cards. This is a nice paper. Alistair he works for an air ambulance up in the, I think it's Norfolk and Suffolk area. So here he's got a lovely paper where he's got a beautiful SPC chart that actually evidences what he's talking about in his paper. He did publish another paper, by the way, where he published an SPC chart that showed that actually, although they thought that there was improvement in their data, they thought what they'd done had resulted in improvement. In fact, it had. He hadn't driven improvement in that. So that's a very brave thing to do, isn't it? Just to show that actually not everything that we try and do results in improvement. So this is what we want to be aiming for. So we want to be aiming for SPC charts where we can evidence that the changes that we made resulted in improvement. This is looking at length of stay for frail elderly patients. This is from Sheffield. This is my favourite chart. Here we can see that length of stay reduced very dramatically as a result of a couple of interventions that were made by the team in question. So that's nearly all for me. So that graph makes me very happy, obviously. Just to say, clinicians really like SPC in my experience. So when you get the slides, you might want to have a little look at this video. It's just a couple of minutes long. And this is Sally talking about how she used some of our SPC tools, found them really easy to use, and also learnt a lot more about her service. So my parting thought before I hand back to Vicky, to you, is if we use SPC a lot more in the NHS, and if we got rid of all of those rag charts and spaghetti charts and other horrible things, then we'd be a lot less headless chicken as an NHS, because we don't want to be headless chicken, we don't want to be spuddling. And if we stopped doing all of that headless chicken spuddly stuff, then we could really focus on what's important, which is, of course, improving care for our patients. So that's the little whistle-stop tour, refresh or introduction to SPC. Back to you, Vicky.
Lovely, thank you, Sam. So that was a great refresh for those already using SPCs and a good introduction for anyone new to them from today. So then back to clinical audit then, and how does this all apply? How am I going to get started thinking about local clinical audits in my own organisation? So I'm going to ask you to think a bit now about project planning, because first and foremost, you need to appreciate that actually you can only plot your data over time using SPCs if you've actually collected your data in the right way to begin with. So you now need to be starting to review your proposed methodology to actually understand if the measurement will collect data over time to be able to display it for review in this way. Secondly is the fact that no one's going to believe the data if it's not specific, valid, reliable and robust. So again, if you've got any concerns in the reliability and validity of the data in terms of your data fields, and then also where you're extracting or collecting your data from. And then the next point really is thinking about you can only review, interpret and act upon the data if you've got the right roles undertaking this review. So within your project planning, again, it's thinking about your stakeholders, And by that, I mean having the right people around the table who've got the right skills and capabilities to analyse, present, review and understand that data. And then you've got the right power and influence to make improvements. So who are your clinical experts around that table? Who are your data experts? And who are your operational experts as well? Because collaboratively, you need to be able to interrogate that data, ensure that you do plot it effectively to understand what normal looks like. And where it doesn't look like normal variation, do we know why? What's going on at that point in time? Did we make any changes? Because it's all about the context. And then you need to think about your next target audience. So you need your senior clinical leaders. Who needs to know? Who needs to be making decisions? And who can provide the right leadership and influence that change? Who's got the power and autonomy to make that change? So if you've got your experts reviewing the data regularly, you now need to ensure that the right people know about it. So once you know who your audiences are, it's about how you're going to present your data in a way that they can understand, not misinterpret the need for action or no action, as Sam said. And it's not always about the chart, it's the terminology that you use as well, which is what Sam alluded to in terms of understanding and using the right terminology as to which way your dots are going. So this now brings us really nicely to the point where we're going to consider some questions. So next slide, please, Sam. Okay. So I'm hoping Jen's been keeping an eye on some of the questions and that may have come up in the chat. If not, can you post some questions there for us? If we do get more questions than we've got time to cover, obviously we'll take that away and we will use that to take forward for future work, and we'll try and get some responses out to you as well. So Sam, how shall we take the questions? Have we got anything that's coming up and out of the chat that we think is most pertinent to address?
So we've had one question which is about process limits and how do you set the process limits? So process limits are set for you automatically. So I'm going to talk a little bit later about the tools that we've got that are available for you to use. You don't need to worry about setting the process limits. You just need to basically key in your data and those process limits are set for you automatically. So they are set using a particular calculation called 3 sigma. I don't know if we've got any particular technical people on here that are interested in going into more detail on that. I suggest that most of you probably don't need to worry about the process limits in terms of how they're set. You just need to know that they're set by the data set that you're plotting within them. So you can't change them if you don't like them. All you can do is to try and well, basically change what the data is. So you need to implement some change. Now, what you can do, one of those examples that I showed you, it was the suspicion of sepsis mortality data, where we had lots and lots and lots of blue dots. In that situation, what we should be doing is resetting our process limits. And there are certain situations that need to exist prior to you resetting your process limits. So basically, you need to see statistical change. There needs to be change in your data. You need to have a reasonable period of that change being sustained, and you need to ideally understand what change was introduced that resulted in the improvement or the deterioration. At that point, you could recalculate your process limits. But we do provide quite a lot more training, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about the additional training that you can tap into, where we go into that question in quite a lot more detail. So I hope that helps. And I can see lots more chat coming in.
There was one question about software, recommended software to use, Sam.
Okay, so we've got lots of tools for you to use that are based in Excel. So look, you're going to steal my thunder now. We've got a tool which enables you to create 1 chart or 12 charts or even 50 charts. And that's just in Excel. So all you need to do is to put your data into the tools and it will create all of those charts for you, plus those icons and those icon tables. Now, if you're working in an organisation that is using this quite extensively, you might want to link up with your analytical teams, because we also have solutions that are available for free. using SQL. So if we've got any SQL people on this session that are interested in SQL, or if any of you use Power BI, we've also got solutions for you to use locally, which mean that the charts can be produced at scale. But if you've only got Excel, we've got tools that you can use to create your very own charts. How exciting is that, Vicky?
It's really exciting. It's good. Really easy to use. We've got another question, Sam. If a measure is annually, can this still be used to measure improvement, or do you have to wait 6 years?
Well, you'd really, if you've got annual data, that's going to be a problem. And am I right in thinking, Vicky, that historically sometimes audits might be undertaken annually?
Yeah, with just maybe one measurement or just that snapshot in time from that week. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's a problem. Annual data is a real problem, because remember from the anatomy chart that I showed you, we really need to be ideally having 15 data points. So if you've got annual data, you're looking at about 15 years. Now, that's a long time, isn't it? I think I'll be retired in 15 years' time. So what we'd want you to be thinking about in that instance was, could you maybe collect less information but more frequently? And I'm quite new to the audit world, but I get a sense that that is starting to happen, talking to a few clinicians I know that are responsible for some audits. So thinking about maybe collecting just a few measures, those really important measures, but collecting them quite a lot more frequently. Is that fair, Vicky? Is that the kind of conversation that's happening in the audit world?
I think so, and I know I'm going to touch on some drivers a bit later on and questioning the driver of the project. I think somebody's also put in about annual data more for assurance instead of quality improvements as well. So yeah, it really depends on what you're looking at and why. Somebody else has put about the pressure on clinicians, which I'm obviously going to touch on as well in terms of deciding what you're collecting and how you're collecting it. So we've really got to start thinking really carefully now, haven't we, about the why we're undertaking the audit to begin with.
Okay, I'm just looking in the rest of the chat, Vicky. So I think I've answered the process limit question. So you need to use 3 sigma. You can't set process limits without that calculation. As I said, the tools that we've got do that for you automatically. What else have we got down here?
So I'll just add as well, I've just put in the calculation for how we do sigma as well, or it will pop up in a second.
Lovely.
Thanks, Jen. What else have we got here?
Yeah.
I might ask people a question.
Yeah, I think we've got a comment about questioning why we're not winning enough. It's the data collection needs really. Yeah, you've got to have the right stakeholders involved, but you need to minimise that data burden still. Okay. The chat moves on very fast, doesn't it, as you've got people posting. Sam, did you get much resistance from boards with the change in presenting data? Is Sam frozen? Sam, I don't know if you can hear me, but you might have, you've frozen on the screen. Yeah, we've got some chat going on for the rationale and why we want to know. I think Sam might have left us and be coming back in. Yeah, selecting the right SPC tool as well.
I'm back, Vicky.
Oh, lovely.
Did you realise that you lost me there?
Yes, I realised we lost you. I thought you were going out and coming back in as well. So yeah, yes, another comment here about clinicians being responsible for pulling the data. Fantastic. There are ways of it. Yeah. So you've got to, and I will touch on that. You've got to really think about what data you need and where you're going to get it. And yeah, we don't have capacity to support every single audit. Yeah, so it's about deciding what you're going to audit. Yeah, what and why. I totally agree with you. 2 really good words. This is all really positive. I think we're all on the same. We're all on that same sheet of paper, aren't we? So I'll wait for you to load the slides up again, Sam.
So I think they're back. Are they back?
We're all back and fully in action, aren't we? So we're on 10:54. Shall we? Do you think we should move on?
Yeah. So are we on the question slide? I'm just checking.
You're on the
you can see
question
the
slide at the moment. Yep. And we'll
Okay.
move on to what this means for clinical audit then, if everybody's happy.
Cool. Can I just ask big people a quick question, Vicky? I think this is when it chucked me out. So maybe people didn't want to ask me to ask this question. So do you want to give me a thumbs up if you're already using SPC? So you can use the little thumbs up. If you go to the, okay, I can see some thumbs up, or you can put a thumbs up in the chat, or you could use, you could put a yes in the chat box. So it looks like we've got a few people doing it already. So that's good, isn't it?
That's really positive. It's positive because I think you do have to start, and you can start simple. It's dipping your toes in and starting to have a go, isn't it?
Okay, I'm going to move us on then.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Sam. Brilliant. So what does this now mean then for clinical audit then? So we've already got a number of continuous national clinical audits who collect and present data over time using SPCs. We've got the National Emergency Laparotomy Audit, the Falls and Fragility Programme. There's also other audits who make data available to download for us to produce our own charts, such as the ARChem ones and the National Early Inflammatory Arthritis Audit. So we now all need to actively starting to apply this to our local programmes as well. So if you're not already using SPC, or you want to actually build further upon you using it if you've already started, it's who do you now need to go away and talk to really after today's webinar, so that we can change our approach for clinical audit to enable data collection and then presentation over time. So a big place to start really is with our clinical audit teams, and I know we'll have a lot of audit teams on the call today. We've obviously got some clinicians as well. So for those of us working in clinical audit, this is our teams, our facilitators who are working with our frontline teams to project plan. So we've now got to go away and start making them think differently about project planning. Clinical audit leads who are responsible for supporting clinical audit in their area. We want them to question project teams more in the why this topic and why now approach. If it's really important to audit, then it's really important to get the methodology right to enable accurate interpretation of that data and appropriate improvements to be made if required. It's then about us engaging our senior clinicians in this way of thinking, who actually are probably going to welcome this, as they need accurate information to enable informed decisions for making changes to patient care and services. And then we've got our project teams. Now we've got to refocus their mindsets to look further than the often hidden real driver of that project. So you need to do a project for your training programme. Well, let's see how we can make this meaningful now for the patients and the organisation as well, and refocus the whole picture and not a quick data set to produce a project. Or you might need to do a clinical audit in response to an SI, say, do we really know what that process or system, why that process or system broke down to cause harm? We don't need a snapshot in time unless you need a quick look for assurance. We need a story over time with triangulation to other data sets. So what do you need to consider in changing project planning to enable your data to be presented using SPCs? And one of the biggest things, which I know people have touched on in the chat now, is the driver. Why this and why now? And then if you are looking at using your SPCs, is clinical audit using continuous data collection appropriate for this issue, concern and driver? Because if not, you need to go away and do another measurement. But if it is, then we need to really be confirming the why this, why now, and actually looking at your project planning. So actually you've got a good high quality project, collecting data over time, telling you the story. So methodology then. Really important that we're starting to look at reducing that data burden. So we need to collect and access the right information, but we need to do it in a way so we're not putting that pressure on those clinical teams. And this is where our clinical audit teams need to come in now and think differently and support a lot more and be able to extract the data that we need. Stakeholders I touched on previously. Who do we need that we need to involve now? What do we need them for? and actually have we got the right skills, knowledge and capabilities around that table with the right level of power and influence to make informed decisions. Data validation, I know we're all heavily involved in data validation, but it really is important, making sure that we're getting the valid data, it's showing us the full story, we've got the right review and we're taking action where appropriate. So this is about the who, the frequency of review of that data, the right forum to review it in, and also making sure we've got the right escalation routes to escalate where we've got concern. And then reporting. And this is about agreeing right at the start your format, your frequency and your level, who needs to know. And then the last bit's the most important bit around the sharing and networking, your successes and your challenges, helping others to see first that they have to understand before they can then see clearly. And then the last challenge here is about the reporting to board, which Sam showed us some slides as examples on really. How can you change the way that you're actually presenting your clinical audit programmes as well in terms of progress and performance to board using SPCs? So we'll have a look at this now in a little bit more detail with an example. So Sam, could you move to the next slide, please? Lovely. So I wanted to walk you through an example of a local ED clinical audit on the sepsis 6 care bundle that collected data over time with interventions and then regular review and reporting. So we're just going to make it clear at this point in time that this data used in this example today has been made up purely for this exercise, for this webinar, so it doesn't actually reflect any organisation. Most of you will have heard of the UK Sepsis Trust and of their sepsis screening and action tool, which includes the sepsis 6 care bundle. Some people refer to it as the Buffalo Score or the Buffalo 6. Now, I do appreciate that we've obviously got attendees from all types of health and social care organisations on the call, but we needed to use an example, and this one does reflect an acute ED, but actually the principles are the same across all settings and projects. So sepsis has previously been a sequin. It's on the RChem audit programme, comes around about every 3 years. Not purely continuous, they pick about 5 cases per week over about 4 to 5 months so that you can plot it. Does go off the radar if you haven't got a clinical champion there and it's not a continuous data collection. You've got the risk of maybe only getting people's attention at the point where actually we need to participate again, but actually sepsis needs to be a KPI that you're looking at continuously. So we need to think really carefully at this project planning stage now to get this right, so we actually do truly achieve a quality improvement journey and we're not guilty again at looking at a snapshot in time. So we've already decided the why. We know that we want to have sepsis as a KPI, so it's a high priority for us and that's our driver. But we know that we also want to collect the data over time, but we also know that we want to reduce our data burden, and this is in ED. We're still working with COVID pressures, not just on ED, but system-wide. We've got too many patients tipping up at the front door, we haven't got enough staff, and we've got problems in terms of patient flow through the system, slow, delayed, might even be blocked. We also know that we don't want to impact on the quality of care that's received or patient outcomes, and this pressure system-wide isn't going to improve any time soon. So what can we do? Because in terms of clinical audit, monitoring the quality and outcomes of our patients, we still want to push this forward despite the current pressures that we're all facing. So with this example, we've got a defined set of criteria and standards. We've got to think really carefully about the data and how we're going to collect it, so actually we can understand our compliance over time. We need to be able to respond to any non-compliance where we feel that there isn't normal variation. Now, this doesn't mean that we need to collect a lot of additional data to understand the whys, but we must understand what we do need to know, and if we already collect this somewhere and can access it. So this is all about triangulation of your data sources and reducing data burden on the frontline staff. And this is where your audit departments and QI teams, whatever your team's called in your own organisation, we come in as the experts in the project management and information systems within your own organisations. So it's about actually being smart in your project planning and thinking, what is it we need to know? Where can we already access that from? That doesn't mean coming up with a massive pro forma for your clinical teams to be collecting the data on. So you've got your defined criteria and standards, you know what data you want to collect or pull for triangulation, you know who's going to data collect, you've addressed all your reliability and validity issues, and you've definitely minimised that data burden. Now you're also going to start to look slightly differently and think about how you can embed this data collection into your current systems and processes to further reduce that data burden over time. So you know that you're already wanting to triangulate your data. You've already decided you don't want to look at this as a snapshot in time. You want to embed this as a key performance indicator that you're looking at continuously. Therefore, how can we naturally get this embedded to reduce that data burden? Thank you, Sam. If you could move on to the next slide, please. Lovely. So for today's example, I'm just going to show you two of the standards. So upon that decision then to apply that sepsis 6, following the screening that you've undertaken with your patients, the first dose of IV antibiotics needs to be administered within an hour. And you can see here from the way that the dots have been plotted that actually we've been extracting and collecting and plotting this data since January 20. Now here in this chart, the data has been plotted monthly, but actually because it's been collected continuously, you can also plot it weekly or daily as well. So you can cut your data in a number of different ways. So you can see from this slide that back in Q4 of 2021, we weren't achieving 100% compliance. And this is where with clinical audit, we've always got our target set at 100%, and we don't want to move our target because we always want to get it right for every patient every time. So from February 20, we started to dip, and then further again, you can see in May and June, showing a couple of amber dots there, showing special cause and concern. However, if you think about the time period that we're looking at here, what was happening in February and March 2020? It was the first wave of COVID hitting our EDs. So at the time, we were still looking to see how we can improve our response times to implementing the sepsis 6. And we did actually want to make some changes because we want to still be making sure we're aiming for that 100% for all patients. So we did make changes here, and we did look at where the IV lines and cannulas were stored and accessed. We also looked at relocating the IV antibiotic storage cupboard, again for ease of access, more visible, more efficient. Now you can see on the chart that our compliance began to increase again from July 20 up to September 20, where again, we started to see a decline again. But you've got to be really careful because what we're seeing here is we're moving into wave 2 of COVID. So the vaccination programme started in Q3, it started about December 20 time, didn't really get going until about January 2021. In the meantime, we're still looking at potential changes we can make. ED was still under immense pressure. So the team introduced sepsis bundle bags, a grab a bag initiative. Once that screening tool's identified the requirement to implement that sepsis 6, everything you need to set your patient up to receive that sepsis 6 within an hour. Started to see compliance increase over time, but you could also argue that we were now moving out of wave 2 and the vaccinations were now being rolled out successfully. So we're trying to understand the full picture of why the data may be as it is and not just think the changes we made actually impacted on increasing our compliance. Next slide, please, Sam. Okay, so again, this standard was all patients to receive oxygen within an hour. Now, you'd expect the standards compliance to be maybe higher than the IV antibiotics simply due to the ease of starting a patient on oxygen once prescribed. You're not waiting for to get your IV access. So you can see from the chart that the COVID waves again have impacted on compliance. You can see the dips going in and out again based upon the waves of COVID. Obviously, COVID has still got pressures on your staff shortages as well, your increased attendances on AD and your patient flows. So the interventions such as the sepsis bundle bags will have improved the compliance for this standard as well as your IV antibiotics. But we also started to display the data to keep this at the forefront of everyone's minds. Then this target's set at 100%. We want all patients all of the time to be getting the sepsis 6. So again, you can see that there's slight special cause concern around wave 2, with us seeing an increase as we move through early 2021 with the rollout of that vaccination programme and then coming out of that next COVID waves. You can see a special cause improvement from May 21 onwards. Now, you could argue that actually the interventions didn't really make a difference to this standard, and it was actually the COVID that impacted. But the interventions were to improve the sepsis 6 standards overall. And like I said, we always aim for that 100% target. So we will always be looking to see where we could make improvements to hit that 100% for all patients all the time. Using this example in this way, I think, is trying to also get across the key message here that actually the frontline pressures are not easing. Even as we move into that transition to recovery again, our recovery phase is going to take a long time, and we all know that already. So we've got to find ways of monitoring the quality and effectiveness of care whilst reducing that data burden and considering further interventions to make improvements where required, and not just accept that actually we're currently under COVID pressures. We've always got to be looking to improve, but we've really got to support our frontline staff to help this happen. Now, our teams continue to be under so much pressure, and this is about our clinical audit teams and our experts in QI stepping in now in that supportive role in these unprecedented times. So if we could move to the next slide, please, Sam. So thinking now about the fact that we've plotted that data, it's now just thinking about for clinical audits about this reporting element. And I know I touched on stakeholders and having the right experts around the table previously to review that data. So I just wanted to touch on it again here with this example. So we've planned well. We've ensured data robustness, validity, reliability, and we've also made sure that we've included the right stakeholders at the right levels right from the start. And this is now where you're going to pull on your stakeholders again. And this bit's really important in the fact that they've become actively involved in reviewing, understanding, and making decisions on that data. Now, if the data collection and extraction is embedded well, the presentation of data for review and understanding, including action where appropriate, should be so much easier. So I don't know how many auditors we've got on the webinar today that still struggle to get a report and an action plan. And we're not asking for a thesis. We just want evidence that any data collected, we've had a timely review and we've had decisions made in terms of if we need to take action or not. And then hopefully some agreement on when we'd need to look at this again. Now, if we change our methodology to collecting and reviewing regularly over time, we don't need that decision on how and when to remeasure as we're continuously monitoring this. But we do need the assurance, however, that we're regularly reviewing and understanding that data and that we can evidence where we needed to take appropriate actions as required. So in this example then, our project team are reviewing and understanding the data monthly, and that includes your audit lead and your medical governance lead, who are keeping your triumvirate informed. So by triumvirate, I mean your senior leaders. So you've got your clinical director, your nurse director, your operational director. They need to know about this data. ED are then providing a quarterly report into the deteriorating patient committee. You need to find what that equivalent committee is within your organisation to report this into. And this is about you agreeing where it goes, what level and the frequency. And then maybe annually, you do provide that report to board as assurance. And how easy would this be if you can then use your quarterly reports that have gone to your committee to produce your annual report that then goes off to board? We're now looking at focusing clinical audit on improvement through YEARD, but actually providing assurance as a result. So the focus is on quality improvement. Assurance naturally falls out of that. You're then also looking at moving from a large report with lots of charts with snapshots in time and comparison to previous year's snapshots in time to maybe a one-page summary of SPCs with a short, concise section on explaining the data and improvements made, assigning even a level of risk and assurance to that. Your board are happy that this is an embedded continuous KPI that's reviewed and acted upon by the right roles, at the right level, at the right time. And I suspect it will feed in nicely to other targets that your organisation's got to report on, provide evidence for NICE implementation, help with your outcomes in other national clinical audits, maybe in terms of patient pathways. But most importantly, and of course the reason that we're all here, is to improve patient care and outcomes. So ultimately positively impacting on your patient experience and reducing harm. Next slide, please, Sam. So we're in quarter 4. most organisations will already be developing and agreeing your 22-23 audit programmes. So this is really timely thinking now for you to think differently about which clinical audits you're going to include. Think differently about how to collect and present that data to drive quality improvements as a direct result of clinical audit. Now, if you can't do every audit identified, which should be the priorities for 22-23, which ones are you going to choose as priorities in addition to those that are already mandated by NHS England and improvement? Now, that programme of national clinical audits are topics that are identified by NHS England and improvement as priorities. How many of our national clinical audit outcomes are impacted by care received across our patient pathway? It might be worth identifying some standards from some of your national clinical audits where you're not achieving as high compliance as expected. Pull those out as some key performance indicators, do some local clinical audit for QI on those, and then start thinking about collecting over time with those local clinical audits. Also think about some of the themes coming out of the National Patient Safety Strategy as well, such as asthma, AKI, mental health risk assessments, or sepsis that you've seen from the example that we've used today. So really, really think carefully about the what and why, and then move on to the who and the how. So how can you plan for your clinical audits now that present data over time using your SPCs, further triangulation of data to tell that story that evidences an accurate picture at any point in time. So you need to start thinking differently now about how to collect that data and start to think longer term. It shouldn't be a short fix. You want minimal data burden. Therefore, you need to think about embedding it into systems so it's automated data collection. And the data is most probably already in a system somewhere, but you might need additional information to understand any non-compliance, and that might be where your data burden creeps in. So you need to just plan for the least resource intensive way, but to allow timely access to be reviewed by the right people at the right time, heavily influenced by how the data is presented. So the other thing to think about now is if resource is an issue, then it's about prioritisation of topics for clinical audit for this next year, and not agreeing to support high quantity of projects that then impact on your ability to deliver high quality projects that actually make a difference to improving patient care and services. So if you strongly presented the what and why, which is then a released agreed resource for the who and how, you should then be able to robustly evidence the so what. So it's about that continuous review and action. It's about having your clinical experts at the right level, reviewing the data presented in the right way at the agreed regular interviews, but maybe formal reporting into committee and boards at certain set periods of time. It's about evidencing discussion, and it's also about evidencing your improvements. So back to your project planning, that is the most important thing that you can take away from today, making people think differently and making them concentrate more on the project planning, starting with the what and the why. And then I think you're going to end up with an ongoing clinical audit for improvement work stream that can provide assurance to the board, commissioners, CQC, and the patients and the public at any point in time as well. You need everybody to be joining in the improvement conversation and journey, and what better way to engage them than to share your clinical audit for improvement story. So I'm going to hand back to Sam now to look at sharing some tools and resources with you. So next slide then, Sam, please.
Thanks, Vicky. So I just wanted to make you aware that there are a number of tools that are available to you. I'm very croaky now, sorry. Yeah. And I'm sure that Jen might be able to put a link in the chat box for people. So we've got a variety of SPC tools. So here we've got a tool which enables you to create one chart. You can see that you can have recalculated limits on these tools. I can see a comment in the chat that somebody's lost connection. Is everybody else still there?
You're okay, Sam?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. So Jen's put the link in the chat box. So we've got a single tool. Then what we also have is a tool which enables you to put lots of data in to create your very own dashboard. So that's exciting, isn't it? So here we've got a lovely dashboard with 12 charts. We even have a chart which enables you to create 50 SPC charts. So wow, that's all amazing. So that's all sitting on our future site, and Jen has put the link into the chat box there. So you must become a member of our future site. It's the Making Data Count site. Then you can access a whole range of resources. You'll be able to access the recording from this and also the slides. I'll make those available to Vicky as well. So here's one of my charts. It just shows that you can plot lots of different things. I did dry January last year. This is my overnight average heart rate. I've annotated the chart when I started dry January. So look, that just proves that actually if you drink no alcohol, your heart rate is lower. You can read it in books, but there's the absolute proof. I also have charts with my weight. Maybe I'm a bit sad. So we've got the Making Data Count webpage. We've got 2 interactive PDFs that you can access that are very easy to use. They've got embedded videos and they've got scenarios within them. Again, Jen has put the link in the chat box. Also, if you join one of our future training sessions, you'll be able to request some of these. So you can't have the teddy bears, that's Clive and Barney bears, but you will be able to request some guides. We're not going to put the link in the chat box today because we've run out of guides because they've been so popular. But if you sign up for a future course, then you can get your own guides. So here's the future site. So it's easy to navigate. So we've got an events calendar where you can find out about all of our training, and you've got the registration links there as well. Then we've got the tools section, and then we have training information. That's where all of the slides and the recordings go. You can see there's quite a number of other categories there. We've got quite an active discussion forum section there as well. So here's the rest of our training. So we provide currently 6 steps of training. We haven't run step 7 yet. That starts in April. Each of these is an hour long. You might want to use, you might want to join. Oh, somebody's taken control of my slides. That's interesting. I don't know what they've done with them. That's a bit naughty, isn't it? Let's see if I can go back in. Your face made me laugh there, Vicky.
I think it was the same face as me, which was no. Well done for getting your slides back up.
Okay, we're back up. I'm not sure if you're seeing exactly the same thing as I'm seeing, but I'm going back to our step training. Is that where we are now?
Yeah.
So each of these sessions, each of these sessions is an hour long. We run each of these once a month. So I've kind of covered most of step 1 with you today, but you might want to join step 2 to learn about using the tools. Then you can learn about writing narrative. Step 4, we go through when to recalculate process limits and many more fun things. And then we've got other steps that look at benchmarking and also techniques for improvements. And what we want people to do once they've come along to training is to pledge some action. So here are some nice photos when people pledged action, when we were allowed to actually meet people. And here's Becky, she pledged action, and look, she made a beautiful Making Data Count wall. So I like Becky. She received some nice merchandise as a result of doing that. So there's an incentive. So I think we want to use Menti for a few minutes now, don't we, Sarah?
Yes, please. And thank you, Sam. And thank you to the person that said, I clicked the wrong button. They took control of your slides. We got it sorted. It's not a problem. Jen, if if everybody could please go to Mentimeter, please. We're just going to spend literally, we've got just a couple of minutes to just pose 2 questions. And because time's short, can we go to the first question? Thank you, Jen. So just letting people
link in the chat as well, Jen.
That would be lovely. So thinking about the points that Vicky has really talked through, and there's been such a wealth of information in the chat as well, and picking up on the points that Sam has raised for SBC, how does making data count for clinical audit apply to you? So if we can literally just spend 1 minute, so we're doing a quick and dirty so we get ourselves off on time, and Vicky's got a roundup to do in just a minute. Everyone should be able to gain access. Jen, thank you so much for putting the codes in the chat. Jen, those will appear live, will they, on the screen? Oh yes, here we go. Here they come.
Oh, that's good.
Lovely. Change of direction, solid grounding. I need to advocate for change. That's a really powerful tool for that. Okay, any more? Assume it will start rolling. Because you work in clinical audit, question mark. I love that. It's almost like, well, why wouldn't I be using SPC? I love that it's actually just becoming part of what we should be doing. I hope it's in everyone's induction programs for their new staff.
It needs to be, doesn't it? Maybe we could have a look at that.
Yeah.
Sarah, NQI can, that would be good.
Okay, thank you. What we're going to do is pull this information from Menti, and we'll upload this when we've had a chance to look at it and just put a couple of points to it as well. So we'll come back to that. We could, Jen, go to the next question, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. And again, thinking about everything that Vicky and Sam have said and relating to using Making Data Count specifically for clinical audit, what actions and different approaches will you take after today's session? What will you change? And it might be that you're saying, I don't need to change anything, I'm doing this. But actually, I think by some of the questions, people are really interested in taking forward SPC. So thank you. Here come the answers. Yeah, I've been trying to adapt reports to include SPC. I think sometimes there can be resistance. There still can be resistance out there with the RAG ratings. And I think actually if you need an advocate, if you need someone to support, please put yourself in contact with us, and perhaps we can help through our network of colleagues to try and show the difference it can make. Promote SPC when discussing audit, absolutely. Yeah. Always ask, can we SPC this? Love it. I think we should always ask that. I love those amber cards, red card, yellow card, red card.
I think that asking from the SPC, sorry Sarah, is right back in that project planning stage in terms of audit, isn't it?
Absolutely. Suggest changing colours on our SPC charts. So whoever that is, can they open mic and very, very quickly just let us know what you mean by that? No, they must.
Hello, are they talking about the blues and the oranges? Because I think those were picked because of people with colour blindness, weren't they?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It wasn't me, but there's. I've been looking into it a lot because I'm colorblind myself, and there's a very nice guide on NHS Digital. If you go to NHS Digital and then Identity, they've got all of the rationale behind the use of color, and they've got like the palettes and everything.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Right, we're going to call it a day there. Thank you. We will make these comments available as I've said. So handing back to you, Vicky. Yeah,
no, that's brilliant. So I think we're on to summary slide then, please, Sam, if possible. So we'll take down the Mentimeter and put back up our last slide. I'll start to summarise whilst we load anyway. So yeah, we've run out of time today. An hour and a half's just flown, hasn't it? So, but it has been lovely. I've enjoyed the webinar, so I'm hoping everybody else has done as well. So quick summary and next steps really. So we've quickly shared with you a bit of a background information on NQI-CAN and how you could get involved in your regional network and forum if you're not already. So we encourage you to head across to the website or to contact one of us if you need to join. We think we've challenged you to start to think differently about how you collect and present your data over time. Obviously, you now need to go away and think about how you need to spread that conversation and discussion within your own organisations. So we want you to go away, and if you haven't already, get started. And if you have started, further build upon and strengthen what you've already got. What would be fantastic would be to start seeing some case studies, successes and challenges on the forum, Twitter, anywhere that you can find really, so that we're all learning together. Thank you for the information on the Mentimeter. That's absolutely fantastic. And the chat. It's been absolutely electronic all the way through the webinar, which is fantastic. So we'll actually take all of this away and we're going to help build it into our future webinars and events, our resources and our tools. And obviously we'll put some feedback from the webinar out there as well for you to see. So we can announce that we're also busy planning for a future session with Sam that will be aimed at our clinical audit leads as well. So we will announce that date as soon as it's in the diary as well. So once you see that coming out, it's worth making sure that any audit leads in your organisation know about it as well. And we've challenged you all to go away and action at least one thing that you've identified today, either in the Mentimeter or in the chat. And if we move to the next slide, Sam, I think, yep, here we go. We've got Sam's pledge. You'll all have seen this on the NHSEI website as well, where you can download the form and you can put your pledge on there and make sure that you're sharing that widely in the organisation, but also with us as well. We'd actually like to see your pledges to see how you're going to take this forward. So next slide, please, Sam. Fantastic. Look at that.
Yeah, I added in a sneaky one, Vicky.
Yeah, no,
I'm hoping we've got a big champion.
And then I think we've got a final slide that's just got some useful links for you as well to take you to the resources, links you to NQI and the forum as well, and also to the NHS Futures platform, where obviously Sam's highlighted all the next steps of training for using SPCs. And I think that's it for today. So I don't know if Sam or Sarah have got any parting words for you all.
Just a huge thank you, everyone. Really quickly sneaking in before Sam. Lovely comments in the chat, and great that you found it a really useful session. We will get all the information to you. Sam?
Yes, so just to say, yes, thanks for asking me to join. Sorry, I've been croaky and not that well. Somebody's asked about the slides, so we'll put the slides up on the Futures site straight after this and the recording. I'll also make both of those available to you, Vicky and Sarah. But I'll put a link in the chat once the slides are on the Futures site, and you should all then be able to access that site. If you're not within the NHS, you just need to contact the Workspace Manager and we'll get you to be a member. That's not a problem. So thanks, everybody. Plot the dots.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect timing, Vicky and Sarah.
We did it.
It was. Thank you both of you for bringing that back in on time.
We're still recording right now. We're going to stop the recording.
I will.
Thank you.
Now.
Thank you. And we're going to stay on